Episode number 22, The Clarks Creek Gang and a Deplorable State of Outlawry. Gather up the kids and the old folks. Shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. Put away your pocket-sized magic lantern shows. Close your eyes and listen. It's time to strike off on the paths less traveled, down dark trails through the hills and hollers, along the riverbanks and into the brush. Hear tales of things forgotten get told. Join me as we venture into the wild and woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Heron. Well, welcome back, gentle people. Sure is nice to have this music at the beginning through parts. I really do appreciate our producer, Paul, who brings that to us. I can't wait to see what we do with this episode. You're in for a lot of fun. Today we have tales of banditry, vigilantes, murder, poisoning, and the insane, all in one action-packed episode taken from my files. So, I'm going to tell you how you can follow along with this episode here in a few moments. So if you're at your computer, normally I tell you to put away your pocket-sized magic lantern show. If you have access to newspapers.com or want to go explore it for a little bit, you can follow along with this episode. So pause the podcast, go ahead and do your thing. We'll pick it up here in a second. For those of you who aren't and just want to hear a good story, go fill that pipe up with good old red Virginia tobacco. Maybe get you a cocktail if it's later in the evening you need to relax. Or if you're coming in from a hot day, get you a big glass of iced tea or lemonade. Don't get dehydrated. It's easy to do. I want to thank everybody for the awesome reviews and all the new followers we have picked up on Facebook, which is where we're primarily doing our social media. By the way, I know there's a certain percentage of people right now listening to this who are on Facebook. It's just how the world works. You listen to one thing and you're on another. If you've been invited, like if you actually know me or we're friends on Facebook, you've been invited. I'm kind of upset you haven't answered the invitation. Kind of hurts my feelings. So you need to take care of that, really. Likewise, if you know someone that likes this type of content about the Ozarks, a place we all love, please, please, please tell them about our podcast. And remember to especially share it among the home folks. They'll thank you for it. I want to thank the new 5-star reviews. I want to thank some of our recent guests, too, if you haven't checked that out. Last guest was Vincent Anderson, who came in and talked about Bigfoot. And before that, we had, oh God, it'd just been simpler if I'd put it in the script, wouldn't it? At any rate, Michael Lear was Show Me Murder. I'm sorry. And catch that one if you have never heard about Stanley Ketchel. I think Mike's going to come up here and we're going to go track down some of those sites. So that's kind of exciting. But Mike's gives tours at the Missouri State Prison if you haven't already checked him out. So please do. He's a great storyteller and I really like what he's doing. Also, our friends over at the Ozarkian Folk Chronicles, the other Ozarkian podcast, they've had some really good episodes. One of them I would encourage you to check out is the whole series about Ralph Baker and the marijuana grows in northern Arkansas. Fabulous, fabulous. Another one I put on our Facebook page with John Fullerton about the origin of Harold Bell Wright's characters in Shepherd of the Hills. I'm Sorry, Hayden and Curtis, I'm probably butchering what you eloquently wrote in the description, but that's the gist of it. And then also, they had one on Mary Parler, the second wife of Vance Randolph. Someone I had not explored as much of, and I'm amiss for not doing so. And we're going to want to bring some of that to you too. So check them out. They have a great podcast over there. But remember, when you want the podcast where the shit occasionally hits the fan, that's my row to hoe. So come over here. Okay. And maybe you have a mystery to plumb, or maybe a wild and woolly piece of Ozarks history you'd like to share. We welcome you to drop us a line at Wild N Woolly. That's an actual letter N, W, two O's, two L's, Woolly Ozarks at gmail.com. Wild N Woolly Ozarks at gmail.com. And now, story time with Uncle Champ. But this is going to be a little different. You can follow along. Go to newspapers.com and open up, search for me. All my stuff is public under Champ Heron. I've not put a real picture of myself up there. And what I want you to do is I want you to search Clark's Creek Gang. And we may have multiple searches in this before it's all said and done. I've got like 4 or 5 windows open here, so there will if there's a little pause, it's because I'm trying to do something, but anyway, we'll be fine. So, let's start. I was researching some crimes and criminals that had occurred in my hometown, ones that were forgotten and nothing really spectacular or interesting about them. And my hometown in the 1890s, or at least the largest part of the 1890s, had 2 newspapers. They were the Tribune, followed by the Marshfield Mail shortly after, and the Marshfield Chronicle, the Chronicle being the Democratic paper. For those of you who may have heard, I think I go into that maybe a little bit more in my episode about Colonel Paul, which should be out by the time this hits your ears. The Chronicle was not a terrible, always it was, there were sometimes it was really well written, and there's sometimes it's not. But it was a faithful repeater of anything exciting going on in Hartville, Seymour, Lebanon, Buffalo, Springfield, a lot of from the St. Louis. It was affiliated with the Springfield Post-Dispatch and the Democrat in Springfield, so it would repeat stories from them. In some cases, stories that are no longer available elsewhere. So when you use newspapers.com, and I'm not going to go into that again because I've praised it enough, but to the point of beating a dead horse. But when you do that, you end up able to triangulate, and even if a paper's missing, you can generally find the rest of the story. Particularly, well, I speak for the area I'm focused on right here in Southwest Missouri in the Ozarks. I assume you can do it elsewhere too. But at any rate, back to what we're talking about. If I was researching one hoodlum or another, I don't really remember which, there were several, and it was reported that the Webster County Jail was playing host to one Green Barnes, it's not a joke name, from Wright County, who had murdered the bandit Captain Henry Turner. A murdered bandit captain? I'm afraid I'd never heard tell of anything like that. So immediately the hunt was on, and you can see there, compared to some things, there's not a lot of documentation about this. I found a certain amount, and I thought, well, maybe somebody else has already been down this rabbit hole and it's already been written up, or there's somebody's done something with it. So I called Larry Wood, who's covered outlaws for most of his life, and asked him about it. And Larry's a great guy, and he'd never heard a thing about it, although he said every county had a gang or two, now mostly forgotten. And I think that's probably so. Uh, I think that's probably correct. So this research culminated in a couple of articles for the paper and maybe one article. I don't really remember. It's been a while back. And it was, I just kept, it's kind of like the Colonel Paul deal. I just kept finding more. Every time I kept looking, I kept finding more. I'm thinking, like, okay, I've kind of got an idea what goes on here. Now, one of the wonderful things is I have been helped a lot in this story by the Wright County Historical Society, in particular Tracy Bohannon and Leo Dowden, and several folks who I can't remember your names, I'm sorry, but I kind of presented what evidence I had and what stories I had been able to glean out. And as with a lot of things, you find that there is, it's incomplete. There's there's not really any big conclusion to it. It's incomplete. We'll explain what we're talking about as we go on. But nice thing is there's so much rumor and stuff that were told as stories that sometimes they didn't understand they were connected with this same um, deal. So let's head to the wild and woolly Ozarks, folks. Wright County, Missouri, the 1890s. Now, the primary source, if you're in newspapers.com, the primary source is a lengthy feature article in the Springfield Leader and Press from March 24th, 1898. Now, this article gives a pretty darn good outline of the story. It's by no means perfect. Some names, local names, have been altered. There also seems to be little, if any, follow-up in the press by the same paper about anything that happens afterward. I think that's sort of curious. I also have a theory that one of the attorneys who helped prosecute the gang wrote the article in let's see, it initially appeared in the Springfield Leader and Press. And so I don't know that. But someone who was very intimately connected with and had at least exposure to a full breadth of the evidence and what happened wrote the article. And I'm pretty certain on that. I feel that it's pretty certain. Okay. Now, so I guess it's my mission to try to put this together and tell it. I'm kind of curious as you all are about some of it. Well, like I said, we can link together the breadth of the story and what we know, uh, why, and we know the when, and we know the where, and we can fix certain dates. But it's like some of these people are taken up by the aliens and they're never seen or heard from again. It's like they disappeared. I think part of that is they changed their names. Um, so it's kind of funny as we approach the 130-year mark of this happening. I think we're at 128. It's we have a lot of great stories, but we don't really have a lot of hard facts. If you turn them up, I want to hear about them though. So reach out to us if you find something, or even if you find something that I've looked at and you're like, no, you're looking at that wrong, then let me know. I'm not, I don't ever claim for these to be perfect. I just do my best to present what we've got here in an effort to kind of put it all in one picture. I guess that's our mission statement for the podcast, if you like, or one of these type. So I began sleuthing this stuff, like I said, and I've always felt that local history is mostly abbreviated. It's something I've wondered about just from a standpoint of how much do you need to put into local history? How much detail is really necessary before it becomes, tiresome? So you always find my always thing is I find these stories and then the stories are like begging me to go follow up on what either the author chose not to put in or maybe didn't follow up with to begin with. My findings are generally speaking, I've always found there's more to the story. Generally speaking, there's always more to the story. And, if you wrote up the history, like the history of Webster County was written in 1955, I mean, you couldn't really give the gruesome details necessarily. And that's okay, but that means they're also lost until they're refound, if they can be. And piecing some of these together, it really becomes a puzzle. It's a lot of fun too. The papers we're going to use here, I'm not going to go through every one of them. Marshville Chronicle, the Marshville Mail, the Houston Herald, the Buffalo Reflex, Lebanon Daily Record. Like I said, they often repeated one another. And Marshfield's location is really what got it into the story, because it's easier for the Wright County Sheriff to take a prisoner to Marshfield and put him on the train to Springfield than it was to take a prisoner to Mansfield and go put him on a train to to Springfield. We have one guy that they used to take to Mansfield and put him on the train, take him to Springfield to put him to take him to Lebanon rather than go cross country to Lebanon. That's another story though. So anybody from Wright County who brought prisoners, sometimes safekeeping, keep them over there, keep somebody from lynching some poor devil, or if they're on their way to the penitentiary, Marshfield was stopping off point. So, and the Marshfield papers love this because they're always eager to relate which desperate character the sheriff had in tow and what horror he'd perpetrated. I mean, they love it. That's not a new thing. So, yeah, I ran across, like I said, Green Barnes, the murderer. So let's go into this story, and I'm going to mainly follow the March 24th, 1898 I just previously alluded to here. And we'll talk about kind of where we go from here. So the Clark's Creek Gang was a group of men organized by Henry Turner. Henry Turner is said to be a natural leader. He's assumedly from a large Wright County family. There's lots of Turners there to this day. And so Henry Turner recruited, some people estimate as many as 25 different bandits. And it's that they operated nonstop. The problem is that not that stuff was getting stole. It's that they operated nonstop for 8 years. Now, as we understand it, and this is coming from this article, the gang was organized as far back as 1892, an organization known as the Clark's Creek Gang. It was in Wright County, and it was for the purpose of stealing livestock. However, if you know anything, the panics of the early 1890s, we had a capacity on horses and mules to the point where they were devalued by as much as 50 to 75% in some cases. So not a lot there to really steal, not the same incentive. So they turned to burglary, and they bought like first-rate burglary tools. They had black lights. They had they also had taken a blood oath of secrecy where they would kill the member of the gang who told. It's also, um, they were experts in intimidating witnesses and potential members of the grand jury or members of the grand jury who possibly could indict them. So for years, robbery was a nightly deal. If you go through, and it wasn't just restricted to like Hartville, they hit every country store, they hit residences, they hit granaries, they hit smokehouses, they hit, uh, some of it was really stupid and petty, like they would go in and steal like $3 worth of harness leather or something. Or they would steal, go in and the store didn't have much, so because they'd robbed it a couple weeks before, and so they would steal just what was different in the meantime. So this goes on, and naturally, the people of Wright County are not understanding and are really tired of it. Now let's talk a little bit. So you have a Wright County sheriff. You have marshals in Mountain Grove, Mansfield, Norwood, and all the smaller townships have law enforcement. And either they couldn't catch them or they wouldn't catch them. It's just what it boils down to. Now, there was a grand jury that was prepared to indict one of the members of the gang, or several. And then uh, in early 1897, you know, all of this banditry has gone on for years, and it really isn't the biggest part of the story. That's the funny thing. Um, but then the courthouse burns down. The Wright County Courthouse burns to the ground. Now, there were many people that say it had gotten cold and they had built a fire in one of the stoves in there, and that's what it was. Buildings do burn. I mean, and they used to burn at a greater clip than they do now. Others said it was deliberately set by the gang. I don't know. I will never know, truly. But it did create sort of a bond among certain office holders and certain leading citizens that something has to be done about this. At the same time, and I may have them clipped if they're looking. I don't think I do. There were like some of the papers in Springfield were very critical of Wright County, how it's just a place where you cannot trust. You can't have property. You're going to get robbed. It's just full of highwaymen and robbers, and you get the gist. Now, this tide seems to turn when a character named Colonel E.M.E.B. Shaw. I can find no evidence of a Colonel Shaw outside of Matthew Broderick's portrayal in Glory. at least in the Ozarks. I can find no E.M.E.B. Shaw. There is a E.B. Shaw, I think, that's buried in the cemetery there at Hartville, but I don't have any proof that that's who that is because there's a lot of Shaws. He's upset. Mr. Shaw's upset, and he lives near town. That's why I'm pretty sure it's who it is. He was elected as foreman of the grand jury explicitly for the purpose of bringing these criminals to justice. In May of 1896, a couple of years earlier, when the robbery and pillage was nightly, the crimes, many of them were insignificant, but it was nightly. Colonel Shaw, as he's called here, it's kind of like saying Captain Turner, the bandit captain, or Henry Turner, the bandit captain. I don't think he was a colonel any more than Turner was a captain, but hey, prove me wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong on that. So, this is not funny. Colonel Shaw, his son was 19 years old and caught some men burglarizing their, and taking saddles, or a saddle. His son was 19 and took a revolver and started in pursuit, but the revolver was accidentally discharged and the young man was killed. There's no other detail than that, but it's said it was an accident. The elder Shaw, and I'm reading directly here, the elder Shaw resolved to be avenged on the gang of outlaws for his son's death and took up the prosecution. It's going to be dramatic, at least make sure you can read it. The elder Shaw resolved to be avenged of the gang of outlaws for his son's death. Okay. So he gets appointed to the grand jury. And then they have no difficulty in securing indictments for the following people. And if this is, I don't think there's any too soon on this. If this is your relative and you're upset by it, I'm sorry. But I would love to know more, even if you're upset by it. So drop us a line and let us know, or follow over on Facebook. You can send us a message if you want to keep it private. Or if you don't care, put it in the comments. So the following people get indicted: Henry Turner, Jerry Carter, Elias Hayes, William Stacy, and I think it's supposed to be Stacy with a Y, Albert Edwards, Ish Cottengam, William Shackelford, Waldo Scott, and Joseph Turner. All of these young men belong to respectable Wright County families, and strong efforts are being made by their relatives to prevent conviction. Nevertheless, so many crimes have been fastened upon them that they are almost certain to serve terms in the penitentiary. Now, there's also some other members of the gang prior to this who get tried. I'm going to read you that here so I don't get it wrong. Prior to the finding of the indictment against these men, Alex Fletcher and Pat Fletcher, their names have been changed, had been induced to join the gang. And I have a pretty strong theory that their farms joined close where Jerry Carter and where Henry Turner's were. If I've got the right Turner, I'm not sure that I do. Let me continue. They were rather less hardened criminals than the others, and the band became suspicious of them. Alex, the older one of the Fletcher brothers, was induced to go into the robbery of a store. Let's see, which store was it? I think it was Spillman's store. Through the treachery of, or maybe in another store. I'm sure it's Spillman's store. Through the treachery of the others, he was placed in the hands of the officers, and the gang furnished sufficient testimony to send him to the penitentiary for 3 years. So the gang testified against him. While in jail waiting to be, think about that for a minute. You go in and testify after you did something, somebody else did it. That's some stone cold stuff there. Through the treachery of the others, he was placed in the hands of officers, and the gang furnished sufficient testimony against him. Okay, so he's waiting to be taken to Jefferson City to the penitentiary so he can be on a Mike Lear podcast. And he decides that he needs to talk and he needs to try to save himself and his younger brother. Okay. So he ends up giving a statement to Sheriff John Pryor about the existence of the gang. No, I think everybody knew there was a gang, but I don't think nobody knew who really composed it. It was a theory. In addition, he detailed the gang's long and undisturbed career of crime and stated that the gang had already planned another robbery. He said they had planned to rob the meat warehouse of one Sterling Bray. He told how the robbery was to be committed and what was to be done with the meat. To corroborate this statement, the meat house was robbed a few nights afterward, and a search revealed large quantity of meat hidden in the spot where the sheriff had been directed by Alex Fletcher, within a short distance of Henry Turner's house, hidden on the bluffs of Clark's Creek. So I would love to go see those bluffs. If you know where they are or you know how we can get to them, I would love to go see them. Maybe there's stuff still under there. I don't know. Probably not. So this information leads to an indictment of all the other gang members that we've mentioned. So Alex Fletcher is sent to the penitentiary, and the gang turned its attention to getting rid of Pat Fletcher, his younger brother, about 18 years old. They gave information to the granary of Malcolm Hunter. It's kind of hard to read here. Indictment on the charge of burglarizing it. He was arraigned on the charge, and the council appointed the court. After consulting with his attorneys, he, being the youngest member of the gang, was permitted to go before the grand jury and give testimony about other crimes he had committed, and exactly the same as that of his brother, and the grand jury returned a number of true bills. Now, from what I understand, he basically says, you get my brother out of prison, I don't go to prison, and we'll tell you everything. I think they put Alex Fletcher in prison to keep him from getting killed. So Turner is placed on trial first. All of the Wright County lawyers were so intimidated that they wouldn't do anything, and that left prosecutor S.T. Pope not able to get any assistance in the prosecution. He finally engaged the Springfield lawyer, Perry T. Allen, to assist him, and together they succeeded in convicting Turner after like a 2-day trial. The big trouble was selecting a jury that would convict, that they knew would be a fair jury. They had all manner of evidence. I have a theory that Perry T. Allen is the one who wrote the article I'm in right now. I think he wrote other stuff, and at least he's the source for it. I'm guessing one of those guys is a source, either him or S.T. Pope. So anyway, they put a jury together. He's convicted. The next day they try, that's March 13th. The next day they try Jerry Carter, and something happens. So the Wright County Jail in Hartville, I'll put up a picture of it on Facebook, is a small structure made out of oak slabs. It was not defensible from people trying to get in. It was probably more so defensible from people trying to escape because inside there's just an iron cage. Now, the sheriff has a desk. There's a stove. I mean, we're talking a tool shed sized building here. It's not big at all, at least by the picture that I've seen. There's a stove. There's an iron cage with 2 beds. And the sheriff has like a desk in there. Tiny. So Henry Turner, the sheriff is like, look, Turner's going to cool his heels in the Wright County Jail right here, and I'm not going to let him escape. I'm not going to let anybody take him out. But what we're going to do is I am going to allow his children to come in and stay with him. His two sons. He has two little boys. Turner is married. His wife's name. He's married to a Stacy, who is evidently a sister of the gang member William Stacy, Syotha Stacy Turner. We're not really sure what happens to her. We have more information on her later. So, anyway, during all of this, a notorious character named Green Barnes had supposedly been loafing around the courthouse, disturbing court. He was drunk, but then there's good people that say he was also insane. There were others that say he was faking both. He was faking insanity just to get locked up. And the reason is because that night after he's locked up, Turner is sitting there, laying there in bed with his two little boys. They put the blanket over their head, and late in the evening, and this is March 15th, Deputy Sheriff Cantrell was placed on guard, fearing that there might be some kind of a jail delivery to spring Henry Turner. But he heard the cries of Turner's little boys, who screamed that their father was being killed by Barnes. He rushed in there with his revolver and found Barnes beating the brains out of Henry Turner with a heavy stick of stove wood. Turner was almost dead when the guard found him and died in a few minutes. His skull had been beaten into a shapeless mass. Barnes' only answer to questions of why he murdered Turner was that he had refused to allow him to get near the stove and that he was cold. The statement made no sense because Turner had been fast asleep with his boys and had the blanket over his head. Now, if you don't mind, we're going to take a break from the Clarks Creek gang, and we're going to talk about a few words from our sponsor and a few, I've got a little news flash for you all, and we'll see what happens. All right. Gentle people, we have a news flash, kind of a funny story. It appears that an actual photograph of Dick Cullen hanging in the photography studio in Marshfield has turned up. The Historical Society is trying to acquire it. We will keep you posted. Now, back to your sponsors. Hey folks, it's Champ Heron here. I want to thank you for tuning in today. I want to remind you that you need to get your Silver Dollar City questions in. If you've got questions about Silver Dollar City or the origin or an urban legend or a myth or rumor or just want to know more, Mark Cumming is going to be back. He's got a new book and he wants to, it was funny. I got in there and I forgot to even bring up a whole series of things that I had in the outline. So anyway, I've got questions to ask too. I would love to include yours. Just submit them to, I guess you can message them to us on Facebook, but if you, wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com, that's 2 O's, 2 L's, and an N instead of an and, wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. So, Also, if you haven't checked out Tasty Acre Strawberry Patch, North Springfield, be sure to follow them on Facebook. Devin and Peyton have a wonderful business there. There's still some strawberries left. Get out and get them. I hope they are by the time this airs, but we'll see. So now let's return to the conclusion of the Clarks Creek Gang. So, folks, like I said, the Hartville jail was a kind of a ramshackle affair, and it was pretty well determined that after this happened, Green Barnes was going to be lynched. It wasn't anymore about keeping people out to free Henry Turner. It was about keeping people out to go and keep Green Barnes from being lynched. So, we don't really know what happened. Green Barnes gets taken to Marshfield, and we don't really know. There's a period there we don't really know what happened. They really quickly indict him and then get him out of town. Henry Turner is, I guess, buried. We don't know where. The two boys, we're not really sure. I think Syotha Stacy remarries. All of that needs to be confirmed. So let's back up for a minute. And I kind of left this out because it's almost its own deal. But I want to stop a minute here because evidently the really, really, really bad it was really bad in Mountain Grove. And Mountain Grove actually lynched two guys over this. And you're like, well, when did that happen? Well, it happened in 1897. It's almost its own story, and I wanted to get up to the point where we had Henry Turner killed, okay? And we knew who Green Barnes was before we started down this little rabbit hole. And it's just a little sidestep here. Now, evidently, there were two brothers named Dave and John Mitchell, and a friend, or in some cases a brother-in-law, Jack Kaufman. Now, these were members of the gang, and they had been basically captured by by a bunch of men from Wright County. Dave Mitchell had, and he was taken and whipped. So Dave Mitchell the Mitchells lived in this little house just outside of Mountain Grove, and they go out there and they give the Mitchells 2 weeks, and I don't know if the others weren't around or what, but they take Dave Mitchell and they whip him. And they tell him to get out of there, and Dave Mitchell says, "You can kill my body, but you can't eat my carcass." So, I don't know. It must have meant more in the 1890s than it does now, and now it's kind of light. But so Dave Mitchell and John Mitchell and the Mitchell family and Jack Kaufman do not leave. So May 20th, 1897, and this is where this is another thing that leads up to everybody saying, "For God's sakes, will somebody do something about this?" So I'm going to tell you about this. A few miles north of this city, Mountain Grove, and I am reading from the let's see, what am I reading from? From the Journal-Democrat, Warrensburg, Missouri. It is a reprint of something else. I'm not sure from where, maybe from a Douglas County paper. So, a few miles north of Mountain Grove, a mob of about 20 persons visited the home of Lige Mayfield, and not finding the party there whom they sought, set the house on fire. Now, according to other reports, the mob marched single file through the house, and the last man out put a torch on the roof. The They like to never got the fire put out and saved the house. So then they went to the house of John Mitchell, finding now the Mitchell house is described in other reports as just a little. If you're on mynewspapers.com, you can see maybe one of the Mountain Grove papers describes this. It is a small little house, and evidently it's barricaded up. And the group of men show up, and by some local storytelling, they say that they were right up at the windows, and John Mitchell got up to get a pistol, and they opened up. Jack Kaufman sits up in bed and takes 20 buckshot to the chest and abdomen. John Kaufman is immediately killed. Dave Mitchell is shot 2 or 3 times, returns fire, and drives them away. The wife of John Mitchell and the little babies are on another side of a plank wall asleep, and bullets go all the way around them. Now, here's something that's just, I don't know, it's a little detail. It's not terribly important, but it's kind of interesting. There is some story that one of those babies was struck by a splinter and carried some sort of wound the rest of their life. There's others say it was a miracle that that nobody was hit. I don't know which is true. If you know that story, please reach out because I'm curious. I maybe heard that over at the Historical Society. Now I don't remember exactly where that came from. Maybe you can help me clarify. So when Mitchell gets a pistol, he starts returning fire, and they all run away. The mob runs away. So the coroner's jury comes out the next day, and uh, Dave Mitchell acknowledges that he had been whipped, and that there's people on the coroner's jury that were there last night. He knew who was there, but he wasn't going to say anything. So by the time the coroner got done, this is in the paper, the bodies were becoming swollen and sickening to the sight. This is the most atrocious crime that has ever occurred in Wright County, and the occurrence throws a damper on the feelings of all the best citizens who cannot realize that such as this has happened in their midst. I'm going to say that that's not right. I'm going to say that there was a bunch of them that thought the Mitchells were a pestilence and were damn glad to get rid of them. There is supposedly a confession later, so that nobody's indicted, as I understand it. And if they were indicted, they weren't really prosecuted. There is a confession later. Maybe it's a deathbed confession. I don't know. Now, one thing to note is until this is one of the only lynchings in Missouri by shooting after, I mean, there's a couple, the most recent being Kenneth Rex McElroy in Skidmore, Missouri. Michael Lear did an excellent deal on that in broad daylight. You know, the movie, well, it was a book in broad daylight, and then the Brian Dennehy one on TV. At any rate, um, so Wright County was fit to pop. You finally get you have this lynching, you end up having a trial, you get some convictions, and then the leader of the group gets killed. And for many people, that would be simply the end of the story. There wouldn't be any more to it. But you still got a murderer and a murder to prosecute. Well, I couldn't resist. So I decided that while the Clarks Creek gang maybe was gone or done or forgotten about, still had some unfinished business. So Green Barnes gets moved to Marshfield for safekeeping. I think that's where I left you last. And immediately he escapes. Now, if you thought the Wright County Jail was flimsy, the Webster County Jail looked like you know, something the Count of Monte Cristo was put in, compared, even though women were digging their way out with pocket knives just a few years later. So Green Barnes escapes. Few weeks later, he's picked up by a Constable Needham in Wood Township, where he's visiting his wife and children. Um, guess he wanted to go visiting. He waits and waits for his trial, only to find out that the charges are wrong. So he had to be reindicted and held over. This runs up expenses for the county. In fact, he is in another jail literally for years. Before, he- well, he's in for almost like 2 years. So he's continually transferred to and from Hartville. He's in the Hartville jail, and he attempts suicide by drinking carbolic acid. The sheriff and a physician were able to pry his jaws apart and force the antidote down him. He told another prisoner he complained that lizards were constantly after him. Lizards. Hmm. So there's a trial in Hartville. Green Barnes did not get a change of venue. Why, I do not know. There's a trial. He is tried for first-degree murder, hung jury. He is then tried again, I think just a couple days later, and found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 years by Judge Neville. So, Judge Neville being the circuit judge. So he goes to prison, and we know he's in prison because we find record of him at MSP. And then sometime after 1906 and before 1909, Barnes is paroled. I kind of think, of course, you could have people with the same name. His full name is Dawson Greenup Barnes. He's known by Dawson G. Barnes. He's known by Dawson Green Barnes, Green with an E, Green without an E. Sometimes Barnes without an E. So there is sort of some room for error here. So there, like I said, it showed him living in Cole County, which maybe he was at a different prison up there, or maybe he was at a prison farm or something. I don't know. He was living there, and then he evidently gets sent back to, or makes his way back to Wright County. Uh, Once he's paroled. I don't know how long after. But he is then remanded to State Lunatic Asylum number 3 in Nevada. Now, I can find nothing on what got him thrown in the State Lunatic Asylum. And he's there, and, you gotta, I'd rather be hung in 1897 than live till 1932 in state asylum number 3. I don't know how it ranked as far as other lunatic asylums at the time, but they were all horrible. I mean, heck, you can't watch a ghost show without them ending up in a lunatic asylum. Makes you wonder. So the one was pretty bad. He died of evidently pancreatic cancer in February of 1932, and according to his death certificate, he'd been confined there 21 years, 9 months, and 28 days, which would have put him coming to the asylum in 1910. And like I said, I found no record. I'm assuming the probate court of Wright County would have done that, although it could have been a sheriff's jury. It also could have been, I guess, a circuit court affair. I really don't know. But he was remanded into custody and just stayed. What about the others? Well, it kind of seems that after Turner dies, there's no further real prosecution of the gang, at least none that I can find. I will say that I have not fully been through the Wright County records. I've done this from searching media, so I really haven't found anything on that. However, just because I have not turned it up doesn't mean it isn't there. Heck, one of you on newspapers.com right now may find something that I have missed, and I welcome that because I'd like to get this story really for the people of Wright County. It's their story, and I'd really like to get it put together as best we can, kind of packaged. If you are a researcher familiar with the records in Wright County and would like to help me piece this together, I will not refuse your help at all. I would welcome it, and that would be great. If you know where some of these people are buried or you know their actual names, I mean, I have kind of gone through Find a Grave and Ancestry, and I don't really have a whole lot more to add other than it made for some great theorizing, but 130 years old theorizing is nothing more than a parlor game. I mean, there's no way to really confirm or deny. If you want to show me where the gang hid their loot, I'm all up for it. Maybe you know Henry Turner's cabin site. It was a lonely spot overlooking Clark's Creek, you know. Do any of the old stores they robbed still exist? Or where were they? Maybe you can tell me where the Spillman store is. That seems to be the one that undoes them the most. Send something to anything you've got to wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com or reach out to us on Facebook. I'd love to hear from you. And please keep those good comments and kind words coming. It really helps out, and we do appreciate you. Let's see. I guess we've pretty well beat the Clark's Creek gang to death. No pun intended. Probably just lost something. Probably got banned in some country for that statement. Well, folks, I've enjoyed telling you this story. Kind of an incomplete story, but a good tale nonetheless about the Clark's Creek gang in Wright County. And don't worry, we're going to beat up on Wright County some more. I've got another murder or two that's going to take us there, but we'll let them catch their breath after this one. The things that make this podcast possible are good people that reach out and help me. And so if you can help with this or any other mystery, we would love to hear from you. Other good people I want to mention, I want to thank my producer, Paul Hambrick. He's one heck of a fellow and a terrific co-creator. By the way, in lack of further legal jargon, the Wild and Woolly Ozarks is a creation of Jared Crawford, the Heron Boys, Paul Hambrick, and myself. Currently, it is owned lock, stock, and barrel by Klein Champion Heron III. Any reproduction is unlawful, of course. Now, if you act nice, mind your manners, don't appear to be crazy, chances I'll give you permission to use some of that stuff. Now, I relate per minute of stuff used is per rick of wood stacked. So we'll make some trades. I think it'll work out. You'll be better for it. I'll be better for it. It may not be a good deal for you, but it's a hell of a deal for me. So please follow the rules, lest I have the bald knobbers come to your house and whip you. Also, I guess we gotta go. Well, until next time, y'all be careful. And boys, if you would, please be good to the tourists. Bye now.